Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to this special little Thursday night preview episode of the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Matt McPeak. I am the host. I was supposed to do a little radio spot last night and talk about this Thursday night game, but with everything going on in Louisville, the host was out of internet, so we were unable to do that. So I'm going to try not to get into any politics at all on this podcast and stay away from all that stuff. But we got a Thursday night game going on tonight. It's not the most exciting Thursday night game on paper, but it is football, and I will watch football any day, anytime. So we got the Dolphins as a 2.5-point favorite. They're at the Jaguars. The Dolphins are plus 136 on the money line. Jaguars are minus 162. The total is 47.5 right now. Both teams coming off of really close losses to division teams. It took 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns from the Bills to put away the Dolphins last week, and the Jags lost by 3 points after a 49-yard field goal in the fourth quarter. Both offenses are putting up points. They put up points on 2 pretty good defenses in Buffalo and Tennessee. Fitzmagic had over 300 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. Gardner Minshew had 339 yards passing with 3 touchdowns. He also threw 2 interceptions, but the quarterbacks are playing really good. I have Gardner Minshew as my superflex in a superflex dynasty league. I took Minshew with one of my last picks. He's been holding it down for me on that superflex. But let's start with the tight ends. Mike Kasich had his first big game of 2020 in Week 2, had 8 catches for 130 yards and a touchdown. He led the team with 11 targets. He was running routes all over the field, not just little seams and slants and play-action waggles. He probably has the best matchup of any player in the game. We saw Jacksonville give up 10 yards per target to the Colts in Week 1, to the Colts tight ends in Week 1, and then over 14 yards per target to the Titans tight ends, with Jonnu Smith catching 2 touchdowns. Gaskin will definitely be one of my TD score props for this week and for this game, which we'll get into. For the Jaguars, Tyler Eifert could easily catch another touchdown like he did last week. In Week 1, Miami gave up a 25-yard completion to Ryan Izzo, and in Week 2, a 38-yard completion to Dawson Knox. Those were both of those tight ends' only catches that game, but the Patriots and the Bills aren't exactly using their tight ends all that much this season. At wide receiver, I think we have 3 guys that are startable in your fantasy leagues. Devante Parker is dealing with a hamstring injury, but he played almost the entire game last week, and he had 53 yards on 5 catches with a touchdown. He's drawn 2 of the best corners in the league so far this year with Stephon Gilmore in Week 1 and Trey White in Week 2. I'm starting Parker as my number 2 wide receiver in a non-PPR league this week. A guy worth mentioning, Isaiah Ford, actually leads the team in wide receiver targets right now, and Preston Williams had some people excited about him before this season started, but he's only caught 3 of 12 targets so far this year, so for me it's just Parker and Gaskin from the Dolphins. The other 2 wide receivers that I think are in play here, DJ Shark, even though he's only had 7 targets so far this season, and it kind of depends on your scoring. If it's non-PPR, I think Laviska Shenault, the rookie from Colorado, is making himself an option because of his 7 rushing attempts for 47 yards in 2 games so far. His involvement in the passing game is only going to continue to grow, and with a higher floor than other wide receivers in the same position because of that rushing. I think Shenault is a great play in DFS, too, because he's only $5,300 on FanDuel right now. A guy that's going to get you carries and targets. I think he's one of those value guys that could help you out in Week 3. The running back situation for this game is probably the most interesting. So the Dolphins made that trade midseason last year. They sent Kenyon Drake to Arizona, where, wouldn't you know it, he has flourished into an RB1 that so many people knew he could be. It's amazing what happens when you don't have Adam Gase holding you back. They signed a plotter in Jordan Howard, and they made a draft day trade for a tough little scat back from San Francisco, Matt Breida. But I think the running back you want to own in Miami is Myles Gaskin. He finished the year strong last year, had a 10-plus fantasy point game in Week 16, and this year he leads the team in rushing attempts, rushing yards, yards per attempt, and he has 11 of the team's 13 running back targets. He's caught 10 of those 11, so it's Gaskins that's getting all the work, and he's producing. So Jordan Howard has got the 2 goal line touchdowns, but he's only got 11 yards on 13 carries. So if he doesn't start picking it up, I'm going to bet that Gaskin eventually takes on that short yardage role as well. And the next guy, James Robinson, an undrafted rookie from Illinois State, came in and he took that starting job after Leonard Fournette was cut and Raquel Armstead was dealing with some injuries. He's actually still on IR, or he's out. I don't know what the hell's going on with him. He had 16 carries in each of the first 2 games. He had 100 yards and a touchdown last week. And it's not a bad matchup this week either. The Dolphins just gave up 5 yards a carry to the Bills running backs. And running backs at home on Thursday nights have a pretty solid history of playing well. Last year, there were only 3 Thursday night games where a home running back had less than 10 fantasy points, and that's in half PPR. And in 13 of those 16 games, so the 13 games that we saw a home running back do well, the lead home running back, get ready for this, averaged 18.9 half PPR fantasy points. I'm a big believer in trends, and wouldn't you know it, so far this year, we've already seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire have a huge game in Week 1, and in Week 2, both Browns running backs had 20-plus fantasy point games. So start James Robinson. You want to stay on these trends. He earned that starting job. The Jacksonville Jaguars love this kid, so if he's available on your waiver wire, I would run out and get him, and I would start him this week. Quickly, I want to run through a little Hail Mary same-game parlay I have for tonight's game. I had a 5-legger on the Monday night game, and the only leg I missed on was the who was it? Damn. Emmanuel Sanders is under on receiving yards, but I had the 2 tight ends to score. I had the over. Pretty frustrating. But anyway, this week, first of all, I do think there are going to be a lot of points scored in this game, but to be safe, and again, it's a parlay, so I'm going to buy myself a few points and get the over down to 44.5 as opposed to 47.5. That over at 44.5 is now minus 180. Because it's a parlay, I feel like it's okay to take a little hit on one of the legs' odds. Pretty much every other leg is either plus money, or I think the lowest is minus 110 or something. So I'm also going to take Mike Gesicki plus 155 to score a touchdown and get over 49.5 receiving yards. I mentioned Jonnu Smith's 2 touchdowns last week, and I know Mike Gesicki only had 30 yards in Week 1, but that was against the Patriots, who always take away your biggest threat in the passing game. I think he will be a pretty consistent guy as far as yardage goes this season, so I'm going to go with the TD and the yardage prop for Mike Gesicki. I like James Robinson's over 70.5 rushing yards, as I mentioned earlier, and I like him to score as well. I highlighted a minute ago how awesome home running backs are on Thursday night, and as I mentioned, the Dolphins have been pretty generous to running backs so far this season. I'm taking Devante Parker's over 61.5 receiving yards. Parker had such tough matchups in the first 2 games of the season. I think we see Parker come out and have one of his best games of the year. Hopefully he won't be questionable going into this game. I know he's still dealing with that hamstring injury. And last but not least, I like Gardner Minshew to have over 17.5 rushing yards. So far this year, through 2 games, the Dolphins have allowed Cam Newton and Josh Allen to rush for a combined 94 yards. Minshew Minshew has scrambles of 11 yards, 5 yards, and 3 yards in each of the first 2 games this year. So he's hit over 20 yards in each game so far this year. I think he hits over 20 rushing yards again this Thursday night game. I know it's a long shot for all these legs to hit, but I like them all. Most of them are correlated, so it makes sense. So I'm going to throw $20 on it and possibly win a little over 900. So that's the Thursday night preview. That's my little betting preview for the Thursday night game. I was, like I said, I was supposed to get this out last night, but hopefully you guys can check it out during your lunch break or maybe on your drive home tonight, trying to keep it a short little 10-minute episode. So make sure you tune in later or tomorrow when I do the rest of the Week 3 preview. And as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.